Have you ever felt a strange chill in the room? Not from the temperature, but from the energy of those around you? A subtle shift in the way people glance your way, a tone that wasn't there before, a polite silence that feels like a wall. You haven't harmed them, you've only begun to pull away from your old patterns, and yet suddenly you've become a problem, not because you've done wrong, but because you've become harder to mold, less willing to bend, more certain of your stance. That alone is enough to stir discomfort in others. The truth is far from flattering. People don't despise cruelty as much as they despise independence. When you're no longer easily swayed, when your words carry weight instead of apology, when you say no without the burden of guilt, that's when you become offensive. Not because you're hurting anyone, but because you've chosen to belong to yourself. That kind of freedom doesn't inspire admiration in everyone. It unsettles them. It strips away their ability to predict you, and in doing so, it robs them of their sense of control. We are conditioned to believe that kindness will always be returned with kindness, that gentleness will inspire loyalty, that sacrifice will be remembered. But often the opposite proves true. The more you give without limit, the more invisible you become. The more you agree without question, the more you are taken for granted. Until one day, you wake up and realize that the person you've neglected most is yourself. And when you begin to shift, when you start protecting your energy, drawing clear lines, speaking less, you will be labeled cold, selfish, distant. But those words are not truths. They are reactions to the disruption of a dynamic that once served them, not you. There is no betrayal in self-preservation. There is no cruelty in refusing to pour yourself into empty vessels. And yet, they will frame your awakening as a crime against them. They will recast your boundaries as rejection, your stillness as judgment, your silence as hostility. But the real offense in their eyes is not what you say, it's what you no longer give. In a world that thrives on validation, your refusal to explain is interpreted as arrogance. But it's not arrogance. It's a declaration of self-worth. It's choosing to live on your own terms, even if it costs you the comfort of their approval. That choice is not for the faint-hearted, because choosing yourself means accepting the fallout, the loneliness, the whispers, the distance that follows. But it also means clarity. It means reclaiming your time, your peace, your identity. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that kept them comfortable. You're not responsible for being palatable, agreeable, or easy. Growth often makes you unrecognizable to those who depended on your smaller self. And when they say, "You've changed," they rarely mean it as a compliment. But change is not betrayal. Change is evidence that you finally stopped asking permission to be whole. Watch how they flinch when you no longer reach out first. Watch how quickly the silence between you stretches now that you've stopped filling it. That silence isn't empty. It's full of truth. Truth they don't want to face. Truth about how the relationship only functioned as long as you were the one giving, soothing, sacrificing. When you step back, it reveals how little they ever stepped forward. You'll notice a pattern if you look closely. The ones who called you generous while you were bleeding will call you selfish when you start to heal. The ones who applauded your availability will vanish the moment you ask for reciprocity, and the ones who praised your empathy will weaponize it against you when it no longer serves them. That's the cost of waking up. You don't just lose illusions, you lose the people who depended on them, but you must not grieve the loss of those who only loved you when you were useful. Their affection was never unconditional. It was transactional, cloaked in sentiment. Once you withdraw the currency of your compliance, the illusion shatters, and what's left is not betrayal, it's truth. That truth hurts, yes, but it frees you. You must understand, your silence is not void, It is a signal. It announces your sovereignty in a language only the uncomfortable understand. It is not passive, it is active, deliberate. It invites them to either meet you where you stand or to leave you be. And either outcome is peace. There will be those who see your change as a threat, not because you've hurt them, but because your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your confidence highlights their insecurity. And so they project, they accuse, they retreat. Let them. Their discomfort is not yours to fix. There is a reason so many choose performance over authenticity. It's easier. It keeps the peace. It avoids confrontation. But peace that demands your silence is not peace. It's erasure. And every time you bite your tongue to keep the room comfortable, you're vanishing. Slowly, quietly, permanently. Until one day, you become a stranger to yourself in the mirror, smiling, agreeable, and empty. But the moment you choose to stop explaining, to stop apologizing for the space you occupy, you begin to return, not just to others, but to yourself. And it will feel strange at first. You will feel guilty for not softening your no. You will question whether you were too abrupt, too distant, too cold. But that's not your voice speaking. That's the residue of old conditioning, the echoes of every time you were taught that saying no made you difficult. You were never meant to be endlessly accommodating. You were never meant to carry the weight of everyone else's comfort. You were never supposed to bleed so others could heal. You were born with a spine, not just a heart. And it's time to use both. Do you know how power is reclaimed? Not in grand declarations, not in shouting matches, but in the quiet refusal to bend where you once broke, in the calm decision to withhold your energy from what drains you, in the stillness that says, I no longer play by your rules. And they will notice. They will feel your absence like a vacuum, not because you were loud, but because you were dependable. You were the steady hand, the open ear, the constant presence. And now that presence is gone, not as punishment, but as preservation. That distinction is everything. You owe no one your exhaustion. You owe no one your burnout. You are not required to explain your boundaries as if they are on trial. No is a complete sentence. I'm not available is enough. I need time is valid. And if those around you cannot accept those statements without demanding justification, then what they seek is not connection, but control. There is an art to withdrawing without bitterness, to letting go without resentment, to being misunderstood without the urge to clarify. That art is built on the belief that your peace matters more than their comfort. It is forged in solitude and practiced in silence. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not arrogant for valuing your time. You are not difficult for declining what does not align with your spirit. The world wants you to believe that dignity must be earned through suffering. That worth is measured by how much you endure. Reject that lie. Your value is not tied to your usefulness. You are not more worthy when you are more exhausted. You are not more lovable when you are more compliant. You are most powerful when you are most honest. And honesty in its purest form is this: I will no longer contort myself to be digestible. Let them call you names. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them create their stories. Their narratives are not your responsibility. You are not a character in their drama. You are the author of your own story. And in that story, silence is not absence. It is authorship. It is the pause before the next powerful chapter begins. Not everyone will understand this path. Fewer will support it. and even fewer will walk it with you. That's okay, because those who remain, who respect your stillness, your solitude, those are your people. They are few, but they are enough. Quality over quantity, depth over noise. There's a strange freedom in being misunderstood. Once you stop trying to be clear to those committed to misjudging you, you release yourself from their grip. You reclaim the energy spent on justifying, persuading, managing perception, and you reinvest that energy into becoming the version of yourself that no longer seeks to be liked, only to be real. You will be tempted to revert, to soften your stance, to explain again. Don't hold the line. Every time you do, you teach the world how to treat you. And if the lesson is that your silence has boundaries, that your time has value, that your presence is a privilege, not a given, then you've taught them well. And if they cannot accept that, let them go, not with bitterness, but with grace, not as an act of war, but as an act of peace, because peace that comes from alignment with self is worth far more than the shallow quiet bought through people-pleasing. Let your silence become sacred. Let it be your sanctuary, your statement, your strength, because in the end, your silence says what your words never could, that you are no longer available for anything that costs you your soul. There comes a moment when the applause begins to feel hollow, not because the clapping has stopped, but because you finally hear the cost behind it. Every cheer, the second you detach from their expectations, they recoil, not because you've become someone cruel, but because you've stopped being convenient. Most don't want your truth. They want your obedience dressed as kindness. They want your presence, but without the weight of your personhood. The day you step into your fullness is the day they begin to step back, not all at once, but subtly like a tide receding, and you will feel it. You will feel the sudden chill in familiar places, the strained smiles, the abrupt silences. That's the tax of self-ownership. You are not losing people. You are losing illusions. Illusions of loyalty, illusions of mutual care, illusions of respect. And while the illusions vanish, what's left behind is painful. But pain is often clarity disguised as loss. When you decide to stop negotiating your dignity, you force everyone else to decide who they truly are. Some will stay, some will harden into resentment, some will vanish without a word. Their response is not your concern. Their departure is not your failure. It's simply the result of the truth no longer being hidden. People speak of love as though it exists without condition, but more often it is drenched in quiet requirements. Be agreeable, be soft, be silent, bend when I push, smile when I intrude, disappear when I need space, but reappear the moment I'm lonely. These are not relationships. These are performances you were cast in without audition. And now that you've exited stage left, now that you've stopped rehearsing the role of the dependable one, the mask falls from their face, not yours. They no longer look at you with affection. They stare with confusion. Why are you like this now? Why don't you call as often? Why don't you help like you used to? They mistake your boundary for betrayal. But it was their assumption of your endless service that betrayed the connection first. You must let that confusion exist. Let them wrestle with it. Let them misinterpret. The old version of you would have explained, would have soothed, would have made them comfortable while sacrificing your own clarity. But not anymore, because now you understand that explaining your worth makes it negotiable. Now you know that the more you justify, the more they think your boundaries are open for discussion. It is not your job to guide them through their discomfort with your growth. It is not your duty to educate them on why you've changed. The fact that you no longer fit inside the box they built for you is not a crime. You've simply grown, and growth rarely leaves everything intact. Silence in its rawest form is not passive. It's a revolution. It's the quiet dismantling of every pattern that once held you hostage. It's the refusal to keep bleeding just to prove you're good. And it's not always elegant. Sometimes silence feels like abandonment. Sometimes it feels like war. But when wielded with precision, it becomes the shield that protects your soul. You will be tempted at times to speak, to clarify, to soften the blow, to mend what is unraveling. But before you do, ask yourself, am I doing this to honor truth, or am I doing it to remain likable? Because those two paths rarely intersect. And every time you choose likability over truth, you exile yourself from your own presence. There is a reason the world respects the stoic, the enigmatic, the unbothered. It's not because they are emotionless, it's because they are sovereign. They are not ruled by the need to be understood. They are not puppets pulled by the strings of social expectation. Their silence is a language, and only those willing to sit in discomfort learn to speak it. You must train yourself to sit in that same discomfort. When your silence feels heavy, stay there. When they gossip to fill the void your absence created, don't flinch. When they try to guilt you back into the mold, breathe deeply and remain still. This is the training ground of those who refuse to be governed by the whims of others. You are not a vessel for other people's comfort. You are not a buffer between them and their own emotional work. If your boundaries feel like rejection to them, it is because they mistook your generosity for obligation. And now, without your constant sacrifice, they must finally face themselves. Do not interrupt that process. Let them sit with the silence you leave behind. Let them stew in the echo of the things you no longer do for them. Let them feel the absence of your unearned loyalty. That emptiness is not your failure. It is their reckoning. They will try to fill the gap with stories. You've become selfish, you've grown distant, you've changed, and they're right. You have, but not in the way they claim. You haven't become cruel, you've become awake. You haven't stopped caring, you've started caring about yourself. There is power in being misunderstood. There is liberty in walking away from the need to be seen as good by people who only valued your usefulness. You are not obligated to be the version of yourself that made them comfortable. That version was never complete. That version bled so they could smile. And now it's buried. Rightfully so. From the ashes of that old self rises someone unbending, not hard, but solid, not unfeeling, but discerning, not cruel, but unavailable to those who confuse kindness with servitude. You will find in time that the quieter you become, the more clearly you see. The space left behind by the noise of other people's needs becomes fertile ground for your own becoming. And in that stillness, you'll begin to ask better questions. What do I want? What drains me? What have I tolerated that I never should have? And these questions will lead to answers that don't require consensus, because you no longer seek consensus. There is no liberation in being everyone's favorite. There is no growth in being digestible to all. If you never upset anyone, you've probably never honored your truth. If you've never been called difficult, you've likely never drawn a real boundary. And if no one has ever accused you of changing, it's possible you've never really evolved. You cannot expand without breaking something. Sometimes that something is a relationship. Sometimes it's your own self-image. Sometimes it's the illusion that being agreeable is a virtue. But in all cases, the breaking is necessary, because on the other side of that fracture is you, unmasked, unchained, whole. The ones who remain after your silence are not the ones who need you to bend. They are the ones who honor your stillness, who respect your withdrawal, who don't demand access to your energy on demand. These are the rare few who understand that connection does not require control, and they are rare, but they exist, and they will find you once you've cleared the space. The truth is, many of the people in your life loved the echo, not the voice. They loved the version of you that repeated what they wanted to hear, that reflected their needs, that absorbed their chaos. When you stop echoing, when you become a voice instead of a mirror, they will no longer feel seen, and that's not your fault. That is their work to do. You are not required to carry what they refuse to unpack. You are not here to redeem anyone's inability to meet you where you stand. The moment you stop proving, stop defending, stop explaining, you become something rare, something they cannot grasp or label, and that rarity is intimidating. That's why they try to define you. Cold, distant, harsh. But those are just words used by people who are unaccustomed to your boundaries. Let them use those words. Let them build their stories. You no longer need their approval. You no longer chase their praise. Because you've tasted the freedom that comes from being misunderstood, and you're not going back. That freedom is sacred. Guard it. When the old triggers arise, when someone pushes the familiar guilt button, when you feel the urge to soften your no, pause. Ask yourself who benefits from your compliance. Ask who loses when you stand firm. And if the answer reveals a pattern of one-sidedness, manipulation, or guilt-wrapped affection, then your silence is the answer, not as revenge, but as release. Release yourself from being the fixer. Release yourself from being the peacemaker. Release yourself from the silent contracts you never agreed to but were punished for breaking. This is what sovereignty looks like. Not domination, not cold detachment, but a deep, unwavering refusal to be used. You will not always be understood. You will not always be liked. But you will always be yourself. And that is the foundation of any life built on truth. Let the silence be your home. Let it cradle you when the world screams for your surrender. Let it shield you when the demands come cloaked in love. Let it nourish the parts of you that grew in shadow, never daring to speak too loud. Now is the time to be loud, in your quiet, in your boundaries, in your unshakable refusal to disappear for anyone else's comfort. You are not what they say. You are what you choose. And if you choose stillness, if you choose space, if you choose to withhold your explanation, then you are choosing a life that belongs to you again. Remember this, silence does not mean absence. Silence means presence. Presence without permission, without apology, without dilution. It is the highest form of power. It is the crown worn by those who no longer kneel. This is not the easy road, but it is the real one, and you are ready for it.